How are world leaders bending to the almighty dollar? A billionaire prince does a deal in Washington, while a former French president is investigated for taking cash from Gaddafi. I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is Money in Politics. We begin with a crown prince getting the royal treatment in the American capital. Saudi Arabia's heir apparent, Mohammed bin Salman, kicked off his three-week tour of the United States with a visit to the White House. President Donald Trump rolled out the red carpet. Then it was straight to business. Trump announced a defense deal worth billions in weapons sales, a decision human rights groups say will fuel the kingdom's military intervention in Yemen. But the U.S. isn't the only one trying to cash in on this visit. Low oil prices have hit Saudi Arabia's pockets, and the impact is threatening the country's standing as a major power in the Middle East. Bin Salman's hope is that he can diversify his economy by drumming up foreign investment. With more, here's Natalie Perhonen.
Powerful, wealthy, and a very good friend. There was plenty of praise for Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and his kingdom's purchases of US military technology.
$3 billion, $533 million, $525 million. That's peanuts for you. Should have increased it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, the relation between Saudi Arabia and the rest of America, it's an old relation. We are the oldest ally for the rest of America and the Middle East.
Right.
The ties do run decades deep, but this three-week tour of the US is also being viewed as a PR exercise to promote a changing Saudi Arabia. And the Crown Prince is at its heart. Women will be allowed to drive. Music and movie theatres are coming back to the kingdom. And then there's Saudi Vision 2030, an ambitious plan to transform the economy and modernise society, led by the next in line to the throne. It's that domestic reform the Crown Prince and his entourage want to publicise, particularly as an opportunity for further American investment. But there's also pushback on the relationship between Washington and Riyadh. On Tuesday, the US Senate debated a resolution to stop American support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen, where it's fighting against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. The conflict has contributed to what the UN describes as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. It's a battle in which Mohammed bin Salman has played an active role as Saudi defense minister. The Senate resolution was defeated by just 11 votes. A very public reminder to the Crown Prince that wealth and power alone can't guarantee complete support. Natalie Perhonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Washington, D.C. is David Mack. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs and an ambassador to the UAE. Also from the U.S. Capitol is Ali Al-Ahmed, the Director of the Institute for Gulf Affairs. And in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, we have Saudi Affairs Analyst Ahmed Al-Ibrahim. Gentlemen, I thank you all for joining us on The Newsmakers. Let me begin with you, Ahmed Al-Ibrahim. This visit by Mohammed bin Salman to the US, was it all about money?
Indeed, it's not about money. It's the first visit for the Crown Prince to the US. He's cementing relationship with the United States. And of course, he's looking at a co-investment from the Saudi part into the American market and from the American companies in Saudi Arabia to support the Vision 2030. So it's not only about money. The relation goes deeper for the past 80 years, and it's only getting better. I think we are at the highest point of good relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States. Mohammed bin Salman managed to change the face of Saudi Arabia. The more dynamic, the more aggressive, the more money that we spend in the economies, the better returns we're going to get into Saudi Arabia.
Okay, optimistic take. Ali Al-Ahmed, do you agree with that?
I do not. You know, we have heard this broken record before. We have seen this old movie before. And this was what they said about King Abdullah and what they said about King Faisal. And the American intelligentsia and media played a crucial role in this disinformation since the 1957, when King Saud came to Washington every Saudi king is called a reformer. And that's intentional because there is an interest in the West, especially in the United States, to keep these rulers who are serving not the national interests of their country, but the national interests of the United States, and it's even political interests. And I think Trump said it well when he said to Mohammed bin Salman, your country is wealthy and we would like to get some of that.
Right.
And this is the reality. Mohammed bin Salman is touring the United States and visited the UK in much more extensive fashion and longer, and spent more money here than he's done in his own country. So as if he is running for office in this country.
So let me ask, okay, David Mack, are we seeing the administration and the press going along with a myth that this is a reformer and things are changing? It's easy to call someone a reformer when it involves billions of dollars that you stand to make from them. Is that what we're seeing happening?
Well, there's a disconnect between the Trump administration at the top level and broader American society, including the American media. You're wrong if you think that the American media are going along with the image that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has tried to project of inevitable, fast-moving, effective reforms. That's not true. There's a lot of criticism in the U.S. media. There's a lot of criticism in the U.S. Congress. And behind the scenes, there are people in the Departments of Defense and elsewhere in the U.S. government who have serious doubts about courses that have been taken by Mohammed bin Salman, even though the United States continues to have a very strong and enduring interest in close relations with the government of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, Mr. Mack, let me ask you about some of that criticism. So on the one hand, you have, for example, 60 Minutes. A lot of people criticize it for being too soft on Mohammed bin Salman, and others calling him a reformer. On the other hand, you have, for example, in leaked documents from the Mueller investigation obtained by the New York Times, they say George Nader used Elliot Brody to argue for the ousting of the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, on behalf of the Saudis and the Emiratis, because of their diplomatic spat with Qatar. We also have the Intercept reporting on the fact, they claim, that Mohammed bin Salman boasted that Jared Kushner was in his pocket. I just want you to sort of address those things that are bubbling. Does that sound normal to you?
I think that the Intercept report is of particular significance, since it is true that Jared Kushner has now lost his top secret security clearance. It is true that before he made his unannounced, at the time, secret trip to Riyadh and had long conversations with Mohammed bin Salman, that he had been reading the president's daily brief that probably detailed considerable information about internal opponents in Saudi Arabia to Mohammed bin Salman, including people in the Saudi ruling family, and that it was a matter of a week or two after the return of Kushner to the United States that the leading members of the Saudi establishment were arrested, held at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, coerced most probably into signing over large parts of their money. Was this indeed money that they had obtained fraudulently? There's a real question about that. Certainly, probably true for some of it. But what's coming out now does indicate that there may have been very close relationships between President Trump, Jared Kushner, Mohammed bin Salman, and a few others, but that in fact we were not addressing a lot of the significant issues in U.S.-Saudi relations, which go way beyond selling modern arms to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Ahmed Al Ibrahim, at the core of all of this, do the Saudis prefer Donald Trump to, for example, Barack Obama, because he's easy to manipulate and easy to influence?
Well, first of all, I just want to go back to your guest, Mohammed bin Salman. He's not drawing a picture. Mohammed bin Salman actually did so many economic reform and a social reform, and he has brought the country back to the future, I would say.
Okay.
He's going aggressive.
Okay. Sure, the execution rates have doubled. Execution rates have doubled since he came to power, right?
But I need to get the record
but fair
right,
enough.
because the record is wrong on what has been said.
But it's debatable. It's not clear-cut. Execution rates have doubled since he came to power. There's still people on death row for blogs that are allegedly atheist, for example. So you can't tell me that the society is suddenly a democracy like Switzerland now.
For blogging in Saudi Arabia. There is nobody on the death row for blogging in Saudi Arabia. The record has to be accurate.
Why is Raif Badawi getting flogged?
Nobody.
Why is Raif Badawi getting lashed and flogged?
Raif Badawi, this is an Islamic country, okay? And he violated the law of the kingdom, and that's an internal issue.
Okay, so I'm interested.
Back to your question. Mohammed bin Salman is a reformer.
So we disagree on what Back to the Future means.
He's the president-elect of the United States.
Okay.
And Mohammed bin Salman, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, has met with the congressmen, all of them, from the top bottom in the Congress, and he's meeting right now with the DOD. So all those people are on board with Saudi Arabia. We have a deep relationship, 8 years of relationship. We're doing very well. If anybody did not see for the past year what MBS has been done to this country, then they have a problem with their eyesight. It's very clear. Everybody talks about it. The American people are not dumb. The United Kingdom people are not dumb, let alone the Theresa May.
But isn't
and
it
the
true
Queen
that they're not
Elizabeth.
stupid to miss out on the fact that they could make tens of billions of dollars by doing business with this administration? That's what I'm saying. They're not doing it out of principle, are they?
I don't mind spending 700 billions in countries that allied with me, but I'm going to get so much for my dollars back into my country when it comes to technology, cybersecurity, education, factory, all these kind of stuff. So let's not be tunnel vision and look at things and just make the news more exciting and happy and forget the deep facts. This is Saudi Arabia. It's a standalone country. It's a major power within the Middle East, and it matters on their hands. When you talk about the period of President Barack Obama, the relation between Saudi Arabia and America was very stumbling, but the close relationship managed to go through that. Now, if President Trump is going to continue and he's going to take a second term, good and well. If not, Saudi Arabia works within the American channel to get their policies done.
Let me rephrase that question to you.
Policy.
Okay, so Ahmed, let me rephrase that question to you. Does Saudi Arabia prefer Donald Trump to Barack Obama because Donald Trump listens to Saudi Arabia and its concerns about the region and does business more easily with Saudi Arabia than Barack Obama did?
Saudi Arabia preferred Donald Trump because Donald Trump understands the area very well, better than Barack Obama, who decided to stay over in America and make his own assumption and basically signed a stupid deal, which is the nuclear arm deal with Iran.
Okay, Iran. Interesting. Okay, Ali Al-Ahmed. Anybody who doesn't see the reforms that Mohammed bin Salman has brought in as Crown Prince is blind, according to Ahmed Al-Ibrahim. Ali, are you blind?
Well, I'm not blind. I think my memory is intact so far. We have to look at this from the totality of Saudi history. Since King Saud time, where actually there was an attempt at reform and a building for the parliament was built. It's the pink dome building in Riyadh, because there was popular pressure and regional pressure. Then King Faisal came and took the country back, and it's still on that path, where you have a ruling family basically taking the country completely, controlling everything. Right now what we have one man, it's even much more concentrated, who is doing very bad things, throwing money away. He came here with like 1,000+ people, like maybe 700, 800 Mercedes, spending the country's money. In America, he's not spending the country's money in the country.
You say he's doing terrible things. What about women? Women can drive. He said in an interview that the black abaya won't be imposed on women throughout the kingdom and so forth. You can't say, on the one hand, you can't say that he's not a reformer and then just deny that however little, these reforms have occurred.
These are not reforms.
What are they?
These are not reforms, because this is realities of life when they set in. When you have mobile phone service provided in your country, these are not reforms, because everybody has them. That's the world now. You can't keep people, force people to read these things. You can't do it because economically you lose. A man like Mohammed bin Salman, who's 33 years old, giving $45 billion to this Japanese mogul in 45 minutes, that tells you how crazy and irresponsible a person like this. 45 billion. When you want to buy a car, it takes you more than that to decide what your best option. To throw $45 billion of your national wealth without process, without oversight of anybody, that tells you this person is a megalomania who is thinking that he is the world, God's gift to the world, and that's why he's spending the country's money outside. Right now, Saudi Arabia has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world.
And that's an interesting point. I don't want to. Hold on.
Maybe MBS has a better IQ than you by far.
Okay, hold on for a second.
Of course,
Ali,
he does.
Ali, I want to understand the American mindset here. I want to understand the American mindset as to why the administration might be backing Mohammed bin Salman so unequivocally. David Mack, help us understand. Clearly, the administration sits down, so it's not just the White House, not just the executive branch. You have the State Department and others. They look at this man, they see what he wants to do, they see his vision, they look at the national interest, whether it's with regards geopolitics and money and so on and so forth. What is the one thing about him that makes the administration say, yes, this is our guy and we're going to continue to support Saudi Arabia with him as the potential king in the future as well?
Well, to some degree, I think that both governments at the top and I would say also some of your questions tend to over-focus on personalizing this issue. The plain reality is that the U.S. and Saudi Arabia have very diverse, overlapping interests. We need to cooperate together for all kinds of reasons. It is true that Americans have been attracted very broadly by the vision that's been expounded by Mohammed bin Salman going back a year or so. On the other hand, if you can't translate that vision into concrete measures of governance that are effective, in the end, you're just setting yourself up for a very bad reaction. And we have seen that happen before in Saudi history. So I think it's very important that we approach the question of Mohammed bin Salman's leadership in a very clear-eyed and somewhat skeptical manner. And I don't think that that has been true of Jared Kushner and perhaps not true of the president. So we need to step back. We need to take a good, clear-eyed look at this. We need to get an ambassador out in Riyadh. We need to get a permanent assistant secretary for the Near East that has been confirmed by the Senate and is a good high-level diplomat. And we need to start dealing with Saudi Arabia in a more honest way and not simply leaving it to sound bites such as what took place yesterday at the White House when Trump said, well, we're selling lots and lots of arms. Our arms are terrific. It makes lots of jobs for Americans. And besides, the money that the Saudi government is spending is mere peanuts.
Right.
That was not a very helpful thing for the president to say.
Let me pick up on that a little bit with regards to the weapons, and sorry to interrupt you. You have the war in Yemen. A lot of those weapons are being used in the war in Yemen. At the same time, you have so many congressmen, and the Senate had a vote. 44 senators didn't want those weapon sales to continue. They lost out to 55. But you have congressmen across the political divide not wanting the U.S. to be complicit in this war anymore by selling weapons to the Saudis. This is a political reality on the ground in Washington at the moment. And while that's happening, Donald Trump chooses not to talk about Yemen at all with Mohammed bin Salman. Was that a mistake, in your opinion, Mr. Mack?
I have no way of knowing whether or not President Trump talked to Mohammed bin Salman about Yemen.
His press secretary said no.
We have been engaged.
Yeah, I mean, I'd assume not.
We have been engaged with this. Okay, but we've been engaged with this on a regular basis, at other levels, including the level of Secretary of Defense Mattis and our Commander-in-Chief for the Central Command. We do face some serious terrorist threats out there, and I think there is a general agreement in the U.S. security community that we need to deal more effectively with the problems in the Yemen, including getting some kind of negotiations for a long-term political settlement that would probably include some kind of peace agreement that would involve the Houthis and separate them off from the Iranians instead of playing into the hands of the Iranians. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia both want to confront Iran, but the question is how to do it effectively. It's not effective if Saudi Arabia is alienating other parts, other allies it needs in the region to do this, such as Turkey, such as Qatar.
Right.
So we need to get a much broader-based coalition that's confronting Iran.
So that's an interesting point.
Interesting some serious talks.
Yeah, Ahmed Al Ibrahim, wouldn't it be reasonable for the Saudis to get more opinions on board with regards to the war in Yemen instead of going it alone?
Well, Saudi Arabia knows what they are doing in Yemen. And of course, I disagree with you. Actually, the talks they've talked about Yemen and Iran behind closed doors, Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Trump. And Yemen is a fact. Saudi Arabia does not like they continue with the war in Yemen. However, like where this channel is broadcasting from Turkey right now is in the north of Syria because there is a danger on the border. So imagine we have an Iranian militia sitting in Yemen on the border of Saudi Arabia, sending ballistic missiles to the Holy Lands of Saudi Arabia, and it's operated by Hezbollah. This is something Saudi Arabia has no tolerance, has zero tolerance when it comes to that. Yet they want to save the Yemeni people. They want to give the human rights for the Yemeni people, and that's what Mohammed bin Salman has expressed in his 60-minute interview that he doesn't like it, he wants to get away from it, but the international community, they should focus their energy, like you guys, what you need to do on the programs more often, to focus the energy on Iran, to pull out their influence from Yemen, and everything is going to be peaceful.
But
what
it doesn't mean, listen, just
Iran
because
doing in Yemen?
Okay, that's the Saudi justification for the war. But as the war has ticked along, whatever the justification,
it's a logic, Oman.
Okay,
how many Saudi Arabia?
You're also telling me what the program needs to focus on.
Hold on. Saudi Arabia
has. For a second.
Iran has Houthis, has Hezbollah, has 40 militia in Iraq, and has in Syria.
Thousands
this
have
is
been
common
killed.
sense. I don't need to massage anything from Saudi Arabia. The record talks.
Okay, so that's a Saudi perspective. However, thousands have been killed. Hundreds of thousands are suffering. People are starving to death. We've had cholera and so on and so forth, right? So the point then is, clearly this is not working because you're not winning the war, and all these people are suffering, and all these people are dying. And within the United States, your strong ally, almost half of Congress is saying, we need to stop this now. We need to get out of this war. Should the Saudis be maybe listening to that half of Congress?
Even if we win the war in Yemen, it's not a win. War, by all means, is not a win. However, we're eliminating Al-Qaeda. We are eliminating Al-Houthis. We are trying to hit strategic points in Saudi Arabia. And we need the international community to work with us. And this is the meeting between MBS and Theresa May, and they agreed on a formula. So it's going to take time, but there's Iran. If you take Iran out of the equation, the whole region will be stable. It's a very simple formula.
Okay.
I don't know what's so complicated about that.
Okay, so Iran is the center of the problem, Ali Al-Ahmed. Do you agree with your Saudi counterpart in Riyadh?
This is just an excuse. The Saudi monarchy has been always using external distractions away from its internal problems. The country is suffering greatly in terms of economics, in terms of infrastructure. You know, before you go build the city in the desert and bring robots, you have to have a sewage network in Riyadh and put street addresses. You know, and I can ask your guest in Riyadh, what is his home address? He doesn't have it. He doesn't know it. There is no postal.
I do have a home address, and I can tell you my home address. When the last time have you been, Ali, to Saudi Arabia? I invite you to come to Saudi Arabia if you can, Ali.
Don't cut me off.
Because you've been 30 years outside Saudi Arabia, so don't say any lies.
Polite.
I'm being polite.
Polite. See, the country doesn't have a functional postal service. There is no bus service in Riyadh. or anywhere in the country. So if you ask an ordinary Saudi, they do not have a street address, okay? And that tells you if they cannot do this very small and basic thing, they cannot do the most complicated part of the economy. Mohammed bin Salman is not superhuman, you know? The idea that Saudis have that their kings are superhuman, they can know everything about everything. This reminds me when Crown Prince Hamdallah wanted to tug an iceberg from the Antarctic to change the weather in Saudi Arabia. This is so stupid, really. Reality is there is no way out of this but changing the political system of Saudi Arabia by bringing the people in. Okay. And the people, now the country is I can call it a kingdom of fear, because the level of fear is the highest ever in the country's history. Okay. And there are more political prisoners in the country than...
Okay, Ali, I've got to wrap. Clearly, the two of you disagree. I've got to move on. And for the moment, I've got to thank all of you, David Mack, Ali Al-Ahmed, and Ahmed Al-Ibrahim. Thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Still ahead on the Newsmakers, we continue our look at money in politics. Is Nicolas Sarkozy guilty of taking campaign funds from a dictator? And we speak to an Australian member of parliament who says his country is dropping its democratic ideals by cozying up to Cambodia's prime minister. Our look at money in politics today takes us from Washington to Paris, where a wealthy French businessman says he personally delivered Nicolas Sarkozy's suitcases stuffed with millions of dollars with the compliments of Muammar Gaddafi. So this week, the former French president found himself in police custody. He denies the claims and says the allegations are a smear campaign intended as payback for pushing a military intervention that overthrew the Libyan leader. So, were the two men friends or foes? Shoaib Hassan reports.
As president of France, he was once one of the most powerful men in the world. But now Nicolas Sarkozy is under investigation for abusing that power on an international scale. He's been charged with accepting $60 million from Libya's former strongman, Muammar Gaddafi. That money allegedly funded Sarkozy's election campaign in 2007. Sarkozy won, and Gaddafi was invited to his inauguration. But on the eve of a NATO air campaign in Libya 4 years later, Gaddafi's son, Saiful Islam, made startling allegations in an interview with Euronews.
Firstly, Sarkozy must repay Libya the money he took for his election campaign. We financed his election campaign, and we have all the details, and we're ready to publish them. The first thing we ask of this clown Sarkozy is to repay this money to the Libyan people. We helped him become president so that he would help the Libyan people, but he's disappointed us. And very soon we'll publish all the details and the documents and the bank payslips.
The apparent donation came at a time of rapprochement between Gaddafi and the West. But all that changed in 2011 after Arab Spring protests broke out in Libya. The West was initially reluctant to intervene until a campaign led by none other than Nicolas Sarkozy. France was the first to recognize Libya's rebel council and also initiated an air offensive targeting Libya's army. A week before NATO started its own military intervention, the airstrikes turned the war in favor of the rebels. Gaddafi was later captured and killed by one group of rebel fighters, while his son Saiful Islam was imprisoned by another. Saiful Islam's allegations were dismissed. That was until a 2013 French investigation into illegal campaign funding uncovered evidence supporting his claims. Sarkozy is now being charged in what looks like the country's most explosive political scandal in recent times.
But this affair is very important. Why? Because it doesn't only concern the financing of an election campaign. It concerns the application of war. It concerns the elimination of a head of state. It concerns the drastic destabilization of a country, the consequence being a massive wave of migration into Europe.
Libya is now experiencing a lull in fighting as rebel factions debate whether to support elections this year. And Sarkozy is under scrutiny. Will he be punished? And will there be a closer examination of the drive behind the West's 2011 campaign in Libya? Shoaib Hassan, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined from Paris by Anne Guidicelli. She's the CEO of the consulting agency International Intelligence Cluster. Also in Paris is senior journalist Renaud Girard from Le Figaro newspaper. And in San Antonio, Texas, Mansour Al-Kikhia. He's the author of Libya's Gaddafi, The Politics of Contradiction. I thank you all for joining us here on The Newsmakers. A few things to get through. There's the French angle, the Libyan angle, and Gaddafi and the international community angle. So bear with me as we do this. Let me start with you first, Anne. This is not a good look for Nicolas Sarkozy. Do you think he took money from Gaddafi?
Well, as you know, there is still a judicial process in course, so nobody can say that it's definitively, I mean, the allegations are definitively funded, so we have to wait a bit more to see what the next investigation will provide as proof in order to charge him formally. But sure, if the instruction now is at that stage, that means that they have got, I mean, the judge have got more information that push them to reopen this political case. So sure, there is more and more, let's say, elements that are now growing against him, sure.
Right. So, Renaud, we have Ziad Taqiyuddin, who says he took the money in briefcases and helped sort of funnel it from Gaddafi's intelligence chief to Sarkozy's campaign. And back in 2011, Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, saying at the time when the French were involved in the NATO intervention, hey, we want our money back because we have evidence that we funded Sarkozy's presidential campaign. With all of that in mind, are we seeing a situation where it's going to be very difficult, Renaud, for Sarkozy to defend himself?
As a matter of fact, this Saif al-Islam said that, but he said that he had proofs and so on. But Nicolas Sarkozy said, and he's quite right on that point, said that the campaign, the NATO campaign against his regime lasted for more than 6 months, and he never produced the proofs that he paid for this 50 million for the Sarkozy electoral campaign. So if it's true that if he had been Gaddafi and if he had been attacked by Sarkozy, because Sarkozy took the leadership to attack Libya in March 2011, if he had been Gaddafi, I would have produced, I would have showed to journalists, and he did see many journalists, I would have showed them the proofs of the payment to Sarkozy. The problem that Sarkozy has, as a matter of fact, because we have to speak of facts, is he had a young aide for Arab countries at the Élysée Palace called Boris Boilon, very young in the career. He has been appointed an ambassador to Tunis. Normally, you appoint like quite old diplomats there. He was very young. And this gentleman was arrested by French custom officers in a railway station in Paris with a bag, going to Brussels with a bag with 400,000 euros in cash, which is against the law in France. You cannot carry this kind of amount of cash without a special authorization. And he was not able to prove what was the origin of this euros in cash money. And an investigation said that it was never used banknotes that came from a Bank of Ireland, and that the Bank of Ireland had given that money to the Central Bank of Libya. So this is something that is very, very serious for this gentleman, Mr. Boris Boilon, who has been kicked off kicked off the Foreign Service of France.
Right.
But Sarkozy, there is no proof of Sarkozy, and he has a defense which is very strong, saying why Gaddafi did not produce this any proof that he had
that's a good
paid
point.
Sarkozy.
That's a good point, and it's going to be
electoral
interesting to see.
2007.
Yeah, certainly, it's going to be interesting to see what the prosecutors come up with. Mansour, help me understand and remind us of the political context during this alleged period when it happened, right? 2007, because Gaddafi was international pariah. Then he was sort of back in international favor, doing business deals with everybody, funding Juventus FC, LSE in London, had migrant deals with the UK and others. Would it have been likely at that time, 2007, that Gaddafi was sending money to his preferred candidates in political campaigns in Europe?
Of course he was. We know that. Even his son, we know, Saif supported the Austrian attempts at getting the Austrian leader. I forgot his name now. The on the left, the one on the right. But that was Gaddafi's policies. Gaddafi used his only asset, and this asset here is money, to support what he believed to be people he can use in the future. I mean, the gentleman who spoke, there is no proof about Sarkozy. There might not be any proof, actual fact about Sarkozy's taking money. But in this environment where politics is really no longer politics of the past, all you need is to be accused. And you have enough enemies within running against you or with you. It is who will bring this up and use it against you in one way or another. Yes, we should wait for the law to find out if the chap did actually take money or not. But unfortunately, even if you are innocent, it'd be very difficult to un-innocent yourself. So this was Gaddafi's policy. This is how Gaddafi conducted business, not only in Europe, but across the world. He had excess money, and he used that money to buy influence through his sons, through his organizations, through corporations, and he didn't care. He didn't care. I think he got a huge shock when Sarkozy did not support him. And whatever Sarkozy did, I think, me personally, as an individual, as a Libyan, I see, thank you, Mr. Sarkozy, even if he did take that money is well spent on ridding Libya of dictators like that.
Right. Okay, interesting point. And let me ask you, back in France, there are some who would say, well, Chirac was accused of receiving suitcases filled with millions of dollars from African leaders like Laurent Gbagbo, for example, and others. De Villepin was accused as well. So this is nothing new. These accusations have always been around, that French politicians receive these suitcases, and it can never be categorically proven either way. Is that the reality?
Yes, it's the fact. Even if you go, I mean, before in the past, you can see that another president, like which was called Valéry Giscard d'Estaing in the 70s, when he was elected, I mean, he has got also a kind of a gift from Bokassa, which was a leader of a big African country. So, I mean, okay, but I will also add that it's a bit an old school method of financing, or let's say showing that we are friends in politics, you know, because you can see now new form of, let's say, how to have an influence in an election, and we can also look at what is supposed to happen in the U.S. with this story, with the Russian play a role in the election campaign. So not only is not specific to that period, right. It's not only specific to Libya, and it's not only specific to France. It's just the point I wanted to say.
Right.
The interesting thing in that case, I mean the Sarkozy's case, is what exactly, what is the Libyan agenda in that story? I mean, those who are like Saif al-Islam, who just after the decision of putting Sarkozy, I mean, to indict Sarkozy, Well, he spoke again and saying almost the same thing that he said years before, that he has proof and so on. So what we have also, not only to see the French side, but also to see the Libyan side, and specifically those who were linked to Gaddafi
It's interesting.
regime.
If it was true, they clearly backed the wrong horse, undoubtedly, because these guys ended up bombing them as part of the NATO campaign. Renaud, if this is true, and again, of course, there's a legal process, and we are running out of time. We've got 2 minutes left. I want a final comment from Renaud and a final one from Mansour. Renaud, if this is true, will this be an earthquake to French democracy and the French political process, if it can be proved?
Yes, of course. You know, Sarkozy is a former president. He was a candidate for the primaries. He lost them in the presidential campaign of 2017. He is, of course, a very important French politician. And, of course, if a former president of the Republic had been corrupted, it would have been a big scandal. But we have to, he has to be proven guilty, because he says that he's innocent. He will be talking the main news channel at 8 o'clock Paris time tonight. But of course it would be a big shock. But what is true also, it's now we have a new wave of politics. As the lady said, it was like old school politics. And now with President Macron, nobody has ever said that he had been financed by anybody. He goes by the rules, because what is very important in the French system, and we have to recognize that, is maybe some politicians are corrupted like they are everywhere in the world, including in Turkey, but we have independent justice, and our justice does its job, and this is the and whoever and everybody is equal in front of the law.
Okay.
And this is, I think, the important point that we have to make.
Got your point. Mansour, very finally, for those who sometimes think that influence only comes kind of north to south or from the west to so-called third world countries, if this can be proven correct and vindicated, is it an opportunity to say, hold on, it happens the other way as well, where Western politicians get themselves influenced by so-called third world leaders as well?
Believe me, Omran, you are so right. It actually happens more from the south to the north than north to the south. In fact, if you look at what Africans and what Arabs and what other non-Europeans have given to European leaders in form gifts, in millions and millions and millions of dollars. Now, they don't do it officially as bribes, of course not. They give them as gifts or give them an honor or whatever it is. But that money goes to them and they expect something in return. Now, some expect more than others. In the case of Gaddafi, he expected these politicians to follow his edicts and orders and rules, which they did not. But this is a normal case. This is politics. The assumption that politics is a clean field, that everything's hunky-dory, it's not. It's a dirty politics.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Okay. Well, we'll be watching and following this story very closely. I thank you all for taking the time to talk to us here on the Newsmakers. Hope to have you on the program again in the not-too-distant future. Mansour, Anne, and Renaud, I'll see you soon.
Today is a historic day as the leaders of ASEAN and Australia come together for the first time in Australia, working together here, determining our commitment to the centrality of ASEAN and our commitment, the commitment of Australia to ASEAN at the very heart of the stability, the prosperity, the security of our region.
Activists in Australia are criticising Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull for prioritising money over human rights. Cambodian leader Hun Sen got the red carpet treatment at a summit for Southeast Asian leaders in Sydney this past week. Protesters called it ironic after Australia signed a UN statement condemning Hun Sen for political oppression. But Canberra has a refugee deal with Cambodia's government and also wants to cut in on the billions of dollars in trade between Cambodia and China. Well, one of those protesters is Hong Lim. He's a member of parliament in the Australian state of Victoria and was born in Cambodia. He joined demonstrators in burning an effigy of Hun Sen. Sir, good to talk to you. Hun Sen said that if you burnt his effigy, he'd come to your house and beat you up. Presumably that didn't happen.
Well, nobody has come into our house and beat us up yet, but we just astounded by that kind of statement from Mr. Hun Sen, because in Australia, if you threatening somebody like that is a criminal offense. If you stalking people or following them to their home, that is another criminal offense. And if you beat people up in the house, it's called home invasion, it's called domestic violence. That is another criminal offense. So, all in all, it's just incredible that he would make that kind of statement just prior to his arrival in this country.
Right. And in the aftermath of that, I understand the Australian government is investigating possible death threats against you by the Cambodian government. Tell me more about that.
We don't necessarily know that the threat came from the Cambodian government. It was an anonymous letter addressed to me to a local Cambodian association, but it's also threatening two other major activists. One is a mayor of the city, and the other one is a parliamentary candidate and also a present councillor. But unfortunately, the fourth threat, that the victim of this threat is the widow of the very famous activist that were assassinated by, we believe to be Hun Sen, by the government, who is now found rescued in Australia.
In a nutshell, tell me why you think Australia was wrong to receive Hun Sen warmly.
Hun Sen is the worst violator of human rights in the whole of Asia. Human Rights International and Amnesty International had branded Hun Sen as the person who violates human rights on a daily basis. He presides over the most corrupted government in Asia, let alone in the world. It's already ranking in terms of Transparency International as 157 out of 175 countries surveyed every year, and the list go on. The corrupt, the confiscation, misappropriation, land grab of the people, which is affecting up to 800,000 people, now has become an ICC, International Criminal Court investigation. He's the only one Asian leader that to be investigated by the ICC. And so I thought that for our Prime Minister to be associated with him is just tragic, and it's just pretty degrading, because that would call into question our Australian value system, our tradition of standing upright for human rights. The Australian, this long tradition of fair income and equal before the law and the rule of law. It's just everything, just against what Australia is Australian is all about. And it is tragic that he associates himself with Mr. Hun Sen.
China's doing business with Hun Sen. Isn't Australia afraid it's going to be left behind? That's why it wants to cut in on the act?
Well, we are not China. We are better than that. We stand on the principle of human rights. We respect the rule of law. We have a long tradition of being a democratic country. We walk tall in that respect. We always providing the leadership in the world. I mean, it was Australia who was providing the leadership to bring peace to a war-torn Cambodia 26 years ago. We brought the first democratic, free and fair election to this country through the United Nations led group called the UNTAC, and Australia was revered at that time. But now Australia is just lost in Cambodia. There were two demonstrations against Australia in front of the Australian embassy. This never happened to any Western country. Now it's tragic that we went from the high note to a very low note.
Yeah, let me ask you that same question along the same theme in a different way. Politically, isn't it better to engage at close quarters rather than to isolate and leave Cambodia to the Chinese and others? Isn't it better to bring them on board? And once they're on board in terms of security and trade deals and so forth, gently, maybe Australia can influence Hun Sen.
We're talking about dealing with the whole ASEAN country. I can understand that Australia is very ambitious in looking at ASEAN as a something like to the tune of 600 million and a new emerging middle class coming up. And so therefore, we're looking at the market. They are looking at the opportunity to make money there. But we also need to have a healthy respect for human rights, for democracy, because that's what Australia is all about. You can always do both, but also speaking out, but make a very firm stand against violation of human rights. Violation of democratic right of the people of those countries.
Right. Labour MP from the state of Victoria, Hong Lim. It's been a pleasure talking to you here on the Newsmakers. Thanks.
We're trying to just give them the energy and the feelings of the new year.
That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.